Andrew Bone from Rivals.com, BamaInsider.com. He's been on top of it for a lot of years. And, boy, 4th of July holiday or not, Bama recruiting never stops, does it, Bone?
It doesn't. It
Hey,
sure doesn't. I mean,
let's get into the latest commitment because, Tuesday night, everybody's getting ready for the holiday. And right around midnight, boy, here it comes. Byron Young, a defensive lineman out of Mississippi. We know it's a loaded year in Mississippi, 6'4", 280 pounds from West Jones High School there in Laurel, Mississippi. Knew Alabama was recruiting him, knew that, there was a chance he'd wind up here. I'm going to be honest with you. That's why you do it for a living. You probably knew. I had no idea he was about to commit going into the 4th of July holiday. Tell me about this young man, and were you ready for his commitment when it came?
Well, I wasn't. I definitely was not expecting a midnight commitment. I just happened to be on Twitter right at midnight and got tagged in a post and saw where he had committed. So, yeah, I knew that he had Alabama on his short list. He'd visited Alabama a few times, but a lot of people in Mississippi that I spoke with expected him to stay in state.
I did too, yeah.
And Ole Miss was considered the favorite for him. He also really liked Mississippi State, but Ole Miss was considered the favorite. Prior to the summer, during the spring, it seemed like Alabama was the leader. He had visited Tuscaloosa a few times, visited during the spring. He was at the at Junior Day in January when he first got his offer from Alabama, and was really high on the program. And it seemed like they were the kind of the front runner heading into the summer. And then once the summer kind of started and he took some in-state visits, it seemed kind of more like he was going to stay in state. But then all of a sudden announced on at midnight on July the 4th that he was going to sign with or commit to Alabama at least. And so it's a huge commitment. I mean, it's another elite defensive lineman on Alabama's commitment list. And that's kind of been the problem the last couple of years is Alabama hasn't been able to get I'm not going to say great players. They've been able to get good players, but just not in terms of numbers. Mm-hmm. And this year, loading up on the defensive line, getting some absolutely great players, and they still got a few really good players that are still out there that they're trying to get.
Yeah, this defensive and offensive line class might wind up being epic for Alabama. Defensive linemen are flocking to the Crimson Tide. More on that in a moment. But first, tell me about Byron Young as a player. 6'4", about 280 pounds. Got that big frame, broad shoulders. I would certainly, after watching a little bit of him, and I'm no evaluator, his best football is in front of him. I think he's got a lot of room to improve. But, boy, he's one of those guys that just projects as a guy who could come in here, possibly even redshirt, got another year of high school football, obviously, get bigger and stronger, and down the road have the potential to be something special. Is that kind of the way you view him?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have not had an opportunity to see him in person just because he doesn't really get out to any camps. He's pretty quiet on social media. Doesn't really like a lot of attention. But, just from watching his film, I mean, he's very versatile as a defensive lineman. I think he can move up and down the defensive front. He's a big kid. He's, like you mentioned, 6'5", already about 280 pounds. Very athletic, got great hands, really good, really good power, and moves extremely well to the football. I mean, he chases plays down from behind, and just a very aggressive player. And there's just a lot of things to really like about him. I think he's got a very high ceiling, and I think Alabama just hit a home run there with his commitment. And you look at Alabama's defensive line class. I mean. You have
what is that? 6 of them now, Bone? Is it 6 defensive linemen?
Currently 5.
Okay.
Currently 5, and you've got some really good defensive end type, guys who could potentially grow into defensive tackle. You have with Byron Young, you now have him and Antonio Alfano out of New Jersey, Justin Eboji out of Georgia. Rashad Cheney, who's also out of Georgia, but I don't know if he's going to end up in Alabama's class. I know that he's still looking at some other schools, and we'll just see what kind of happens there. But then DJ Dale big interior guy
Mm-hmm.
that Alabama really likes a lot. Now, Kevin Harris is listed as a defensive end, also out of Georgia, but he's mainly recruited as an outside linebacker.
Okay.
So that's the position that he's going to end up playing, either that outside jack linebacker position. So a lot of people see that as Alabama having 6 defensive linemen, but when I look at it, Alabama has currently 5 true defensive linemen. Now, if Chaney ends up flipping, they've got 4. So I think they're still going to go. I think they're still going after at least 2 more guys, and then there's a lot of guys still out there.
Oh, there really are. This class overall, and we've been talking about it. You've been on here monitoring it every week. It is shaping up, and Alabama's had some great classes, but it's shaping up with the potential to be one of the best. I want to ask you this, Bone, because you talk with these young men. It's what you do on a daily basis. I get the impression, and I just want to see if you agree or you may not, that these kids know what's going on too, and they see what's happening at Alabama. They see this class filling up rapidly. I think some guys are like, you know what? I better get on board while there is a spot for me. I get the feeling that some of these young men, and I know there are times when guys try to commit and Alabama's not ready to take their commitment. I get the feeling guys are just saying, boy, I better get on board with Alabama right now before this train leaves me at the station. Any truth to that in your opinion?
I think so. There's no doubt about it. And I think there's probably some kids who are out there who have probably tried to commit and they've been told by Alabama, just hold off for a little bit longer. We're still trying to make some decisions here. And, it's getting tough. I mean, there's not a lot of spots that remain in Alabama's current class. I mean, only, they have about 10, 11 spots that are still out there up for grabs for Alabama, but there's a lot of kids that are still out there on both sides of the ball that Alabama wants to sign, and I certainly believe that they've got a good chance to continue to do extremely well. I mean, you look up and down the recruiting board on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, and it's nothing but 4- and 5-star kids that they're still recruiting. That they've got a really good chance to land. Now, I do believe probably the next kid that's going to jump on board, John Mechie, wide receiver out of New Jersey. He's actually originally from Maryland, but attends prep school in New Jersey this year. 4-star wide receiver. It's one of the top 200 players in the entire country. I think he's probably going to be next to jump on Alabama's commitment list, and could happen extremely soon. So we're keeping a very close eye on that, and we may not see any more. Now, we may see 1 or 2 more commitments. Jaleel Billingsley, 4-star tight end out of Chicago. We keep thinking that he's going to commit very soon, and I think that's his plan, and it could happen anytime. But we may see Jaleel Billingsley and John Mechie commit relatively soon. And then later on this month, at the end of the month, Alabama's going to have another one of those Champions Cookouts where they had last month with a lot of top players that came into town and visited with the Tide. Alabama's going to be doing that again at the end of this month. And we'll wait and see who all ends up coming. And we may see if a lot of these kids like to get their decisions over with for the start of their football season, so they can kind of enjoy it and just not have to focus on recruiting anymore and just visit the school that they're committed to. So we'll see if any of those guys jump on board at the end of the month. But I certainly believe Alabama will have over 20 commitments once football season starts.
Wow. I'm going to get to the 2020 class in a moment. Folks, you can follow Bone on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone and, of course, at BamaInsider.com, part of the Rivals.com network for recruiting. Hey, Talia Tagovailoa at the opening, he won the long toss competition, 66 yards in the air, actually beat out the Auburn commitment, Bo Nix. You look at Tagovailoa, and he's got another year of high school football there at Thompson under Mark Freeman, who's an excellent football coach. Tua, of course, entering his sophomore season. So you could potentially go from Tagovailoa to Tagovailoa as the starting quarterbacks at Alabama. Tell me about Talia, and I'm noticing a lot of improvement in his game just watching him. And of course, obviously, people are going to say Tua because that's his brother, but he's right-handed or throws right-handed. Tua throws left-handed. I'm seeing some Russell Wilson in him. The strength, the the ability to throw on the run. I really compare him to Russell Wilson. Tell me about Talia Tagovailoa and his potential, because he's already good, but his potential to get even better in his final year of high school football.
Well, I think the first thing you really like out of him is his leadership. I mean, he's got a lot of leadership qualities. Kind of a field general out there. He's got great arm strength, as you mentioned. I mean, won the long ball competition at the opening this past week, and obviously has a extremely strong arm. I mean, there's always things you can work on, always things you can improve, and I think once he gets down to Tuscaloosa, Coach Dan Enos is certainly going to help him out in that regard. But he's very similar to his brother. He makes a lot of plays. Regardless if he's throwing the ball or running it. I mean, he can make a play happen, and that's what is really exciting about his older brother. Tua can just make things happen that you don't expect are going to happen. Like when he broke those tackles on that long third down to get Alabama first down in that national title game, and then go on and get the first touchdown of the game for Alabama. And that's sort of similar to what Talia is able to do. I mean, he's just he's kind of a game breaker. He can make plays happen, and obviously, like I mentioned in the beginning, just an overall great leader. He's a little on the short side, but I'm not really too concerned with that. Obviously, there's a lot of really good short quarterbacks that are out there, guys that have been making a lot of big plays and a lot of big as you mentioned, Russell Wilson is a prime example of that. Drew Brees is a prime example of that, and it certainly gives shorter guys some belief that they can be excellent quarterbacks at the college level and at the NFL level. And Talia is certainly a great football player, and I believe his best days are ahead of him.
All right, this 2020 class, because boy, they're just the way recruiting's done in this day and age is, used to, you'd wrap up one class at a time. And heck, man, as you remember, Bone, it would be a lot of times December, January before you would, get a feel for what your class was going to look like ahead of that February signing day. Not that way anymore. Already 5 commitments in the class of 2020. The latest coming earlier this week from Jason Jones, the huge 6'6", 330-pound two-way tackle from nearby Calera High School under Andrew Zhao. More than likely will play defense, we think, at the next level, but potentially could play offense. He did the little recruiting video through AL.com, threw everybody a curveball, initially announcing Georgia, had a little fun with it. Kid's very articulate, number 1 player in the state, potentially for 2020. Big pickup for Alabama. Tell me about this young man. And again, this is a huge, huge kid. I mean, he's just got massive size, and you can't coach that, but also seems to have a nice dose of athleticism as well.
Yeah, that's right. And if you ever see him up close in person, he holds his weight extremely well. I mean, he's a huge kid, but just very athletic. I mean, we saw him at the Rivals camp earlier this spring, and he did extremely well working on the defensive line. And like you said, he can play either side of the ball. Now, last thing he wants to hear is he's an offensive lineman. I mean, he loves playing defense. He wants to play defense, but I think he could be an excellent offensive lineman at the next level, and even at the highest level. I believe that, but he certainly wants to play defense. And it's funny. He told me the other day he wants to be a sports reporter one day. So we'll see if he ends up being a sports reporter down the road. But for now, he's just a straight football player. So I really like him a lot. I think he's got a chance to certainly be one of the best overall players in the state of Alabama. If not the country. I mean, he's one of the top players in the country. He's in the Rivals 100. He's currently rated as, some people have him number 1 in this state. Some people we have him number 3, but and I think he can easily be the number 1 player in the state. That's kind of where I'm pushing him to be, just based on what I've seen from him and kind of what I expect out of him this football season. I think he's going to have an extremely good year, and really looking forward to watching him. Who knows? I mean, just based on his size and his athleticism, I think he could be a 5-star recruit I think he just needs to have a really good a junior campaign, and then we'll see him again next spring. But Alabama obviously off to a very strong start in this 2020 class with 5 commitments. 3 of those guys being in-state, just continuing to dominate in-state guys and getting elite guys on board. I mean, you have Jason Jones, Daz Worsham, elite wide receiver out of Trustful, Jackson Bratton, very good linebacker out of Muscle Shoals. Then you have Javier Morton, defensive back out of Stone Mountain, Georgia, and Carson Beck, quarterback out of Jacksonville, Florida, who flipped his Florida baseball commitment to Alabama to play football. So very strong start to this 2020 class. It's going to be interesting to see if they end up slowing down a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, Bone, because you mentioned the 5 commitments, and the way this is going, about the time December comes around for this 2019 class to sign, how many commitments do you think they're going to have in 2020? Or as you were going to say, or you think they're going to try to put the brakes on it just a little bit?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see another commitment in the 2020 class, possibly this summer. There's just so many 2020 guys that are continuing to visit and getting offers, and just would not surprise me at all. One kid that I'm kind of keeping an eye on now. He hasn't said he's going to announce or anything, but I'm keeping an eye on Malachi Moore, 4-star defensive back out of Hewitt Trustful High School, and he loves Alabama. Grew up an Alabama fan. Was offered at the most recent camp. And, with all of his teammates committed to Alabama, Paul Tyson, Pierce Quick, Daz Worsham, I can see him going ahead and jumping on board. So we'll keep an eye on him, but I think it will slow down because you certainly don't want to get to signing day 2019 with 10 commitments in the 2020 class already. Alabama wants to evaluate guys during this upcoming football season and during the spring next year. Make sure they're getting the right guys, because they don't want to take a lot of guys that they may end up having to part ways with down the road. And obviously, we've seen certain guys commit early and then end up going elsewhere. Guys that we just see so many decommitments these days, and we've seen a ton already this year. I mean, I think somebody put out some crazy number of decommitments last year, and I think it was over 200 kids who had decommitted from their college football program and are decommitted from their original school that they were committed to, and then ended up going elsewhere. So Alabama doesn't want to continue to be one of those schools that sees a lot of decommitments, because it does happen, and I think it happens because a lot of these kids commit just so early.
Right.
They commit when they're sophomores. They commit early in their junior year, and then they start taking visits. And they start going to more places and seeing more things. And sometimes they end up back at Alabama, but most of the time, I would say 90% of the time when kids decommit, they don't end up back at that program. They end up going somewhere else. So, Alabama certainly doesn't want to see that as much anymore, unless, maybe it's a mutual feeling that they would like to, see a kid end up going somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, I think Alabama, like I said, is off to a very, very good start. And, 3 guys who are in-state guys are, you typically don't see a kid who commits to an in-state program early. You typically don't see him decommit and go elsewhere. So I think Alabama's in real good shape there.
Wrapping up with Andrew Bone. You can follow him on Twitter at Andrew J. Bone. Of course, Rivals.com, BamaInsider.com. This 2019 class, because it is filling up rapidly, how many players do you expect Alabama to sign or be able to sign for this particular recruiting cycle, Bone?
Well, I think the number's 28. That's kind of the number that has been, the number that they've been working around since day one of this recruiting cycle. They're trying to get 28 guys, and everyone asks me, well, they signed this many this year, this many that year. There's this many players on the team. How are they going to fit 28 players on there? And I always tell everybody, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about it. Just like, you're going to overthink it. You're going to try to break it down just so much and try to figure out how they're going to do it. it's nothing for you, for a fan, nothing for me to really worry about. It's for Alabama to worry about, and their staff and them trying to figure out exactly how they're going to get these guys. But I was told it's going to be 28 guys, and that's and I still don't know how they're going to do 28 because there's so many guys who are out there in so many different positions that they're still going after, and this number of kids at each position, and it seems like every time I put together my list of guys that I think Alabama wants at each position, not necessarily the names, just the numbers at each position, it's always around 29, 30. So, they're going to have to try to get 28 guys, and, they're going to figure it out. And that's all I can really say about it is that they will figure it out. They're going to try to sign 28 guys. They have 18 currently committed. And as I mentioned earlier, I think at least one ends up decommitting and going elsewhere. So really about 11 spots that are left. And, obviously it's extremely tight. So you got to make some really tough decisions. You've got to turn away guys that are very, very good, that you really like a lot, because you just can't fit them in there because you're either waiting on somebody or you're waiting on another position. I mean, it gets extremely tough, especially when you already have this many guys who are committed, and you've got 18 commitments, but with only about 10 or 11 spots left, and there's probably about 40 kids, at least 40 kids that they really, really like a lot, that they would probably take commitments from. So it gets extremely tough.
Wow. All right. Great stuff as always from Andrew Bone. Nick Saban is the master recruiter. He's like the lead conductor of the New York Philharmonic Symphony. I mean, he just does it better than anybody else. So as Bone said, he'll figure it out. He always does. All right, Bone, I've already mentioned it a couple times, but let the listeners know how they can follow you.
Well, please follow us at BamaInsider.com, which is part of the Rivals.com network. You can follow me on my Twitter handle at Andrew J. Bone, and also follow us on our YouTube channel, BamaInsider.com YouTube channel. We post a lot of cool videos on there, and we just started doing some more recruiting stuff on there as well. So the fans follow us there, and that's I guess that's about it.
All right, Bone, and to answer our Twitter question on the 4th, because I know you're the big party guy, did you cook out at home? Did you go over to friends? Did you eat out, or did you do something else?
It was, with it being a midweek thing, we ended up just cooking out over at my house. My fiance and her family and my family came over, but we're heading to the lake this weekend, so we're heading up to Smith Lake this weekend to have a good time up there. So we are going to get some lake time in this week.
Awesome. Thank you, Bone.
Thanks, Gary. Have a good one.